Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, while you guys are getting ready, Donna, I just want to make the observation.
Oh, no.
Sorry. Live.
Okay.
Sorry. We good? No, we good.
Nope. Can the folks online hear us?
Yes.
Yeah. Trying now. And then we got that weird ping.
Familiar, our S level service is basically kind of every other trip runs morning and evening. So it's a lower level of service, but still maintains that service. And so we did announce that we preserve service on all of the 36 commuter bus routes, reduced frequencies, S level or better on every route. And then the span of service and the geographic coverage does remain unchanged. It really does kind of align with recent commuting patterns and ridership levels that we've seen. I do want to know, May was a post-pandemic high on commuter bus for ridership, but we're still, less than 50% on most buses. And those schedules are public and out now, and they will go into effect July 1st.
Can you just as a frame of reference, so I assume peak times, morning and end of workday. So you're going from how many to how many,
So we're keeping all 36 routes, but the amount of trips, so it's about a 40% reduction in the total number of trips that we're gonna be putting out there. And yes, with the exception of the 201, which does have 7-day a week, much larger span of service, hourly service all day. It is primarily morning commute and evening commute. We're planning to take a look at our commuter bus service over the next year to see if we can identify different options for commuting patterns, more midday, accessing different locations, right? Like, Howard County Community College is actually a great example. They've reached out to us. It's not necessarily easy to get to via transit, and we think there's some opportunities with commuter bus there. CCVC across the state, really, those community colleges, we do see as a great opportunity to make adjustments and serve via commuter bus.
Administrator, curious, so when something like this goes into effect and knowing that ridership is still trending down, is there a way to adjust or take into account any uptick or change in pattern that may present itself before the next round? Or is it you study, use data, make an adjustment, and then you don't really make another one, even if there's a need to shift patterns until the next opportunity?
So with the commuter bus service, it's actually fairly easy to make changes in terms of adding trips in particular, or adding where trips are going to, because it is a contracted service. And so we are constantly monitoring and keeping a close eye on that. We look at the different areas that we're serving. So ridership is trending up right now. In some areas, it's trending more up than others. So Southern Maryland in particular has had a much higher recovery than some of the other areas, primarily due to the fact that there's just less transit in Southern Maryland. There's been a lot of folks commuting in that area. And so the level of service there in some cases is actually what it was pre-pandemic. A couple of the buses, some of the other ones have more service, and we're going to continue to monitor, and we'll be able to adjust or add trips if we need.
And then I was gonna follow, and then I know you do the survey data for riders, but knowing the commuter is gonna be heavily leveraged against like return to work policies, et cetera, is there any culling of data around workforce dynamics and to add in the survey data that comes from riders?
Yeah, so we work really closely with employers, in particular the federal government. About, I think the exact numbers, like 62% of our riders are federal employees who are commuting into DC, whether it's from Annapolis, from Baltimore, or from Southern Maryland. And so goes the federal government, so goes our ridership. And so we are closely monitoring and keeping an eye on what they're doing in terms of return to work policies. That said, I do think longer term, there is an opportunity to maybe not rely so much on federal government and look at different ways and markets that need to be served that aren't today.
Yeah, the question I had, Administrator, was the S route, the S schedule, is that just for those proposed cuts routes, or all of the commuter routes are gonna go on to S?
So it's a mix, so it's S or better for every route. So there's a couple of routes that are at the same level that they were pre-pandemic or previously. There's a couple of our routes that are at the S level, and then the majority are slightly better than S service. So the schedules are available on our website, and I encourage folks to check them out. We're happy to send a link if that'd be helpful.
Okay.
We were also successful. I talk a lot about grant awards. Under the bipartisan infrastructure law, there is way more discretionary grants than there have been previously. And we have a team that has multi-year plans in terms of what grants we're going to apply for, and really kind of gearing up to make sure we can take full advantage of that. So most recently, we were awarded $1.4 million for engineering and design work to make the Mark College Park Station more accessible. So this is through the All Stations Accessibility Program. We previously were awarded funding from Martin State, and we're really kind of taking a look at our entire network, the areas where there's a lot that need to be made ADA accessible, but we're targeting those that have connections to other modes, where there's a lot of people with disabilities who are using those stations. College Park in particular, because of the Purple Line, because of the connectivity there, we want to ensure that we're continuing to make improvements. So this will be for design. We'll be coming back later for construction funding, but it will, include design for new low-level platforms, additional safety protections in and around the station. Light rail. So last time I noted that we were going to be starting 3 weeks of track work on our light rail system, part of our state of good repair work. So what we did, you can see the numbers here, we realigned and de-stressed 1,600 feet of track. And so track itself does get stressed. So there's machines that go in and basically de-stress it, ensure that when it gets really hot, that the track won't buckle. So that was an important project for us to be able to do prior to summer when it is getting pretty hot. We also installed about 200 tie anchors, and not part of this project, but while we had the rail closed in this area, we took advantage and replaced the grade crossing at Camp Mead Road. This is really more for the drivers crossing the tracks. It was a really rough kind of bump over the road, and so made that much nicer at the same time. This is one example of how we try to bundle projects so that when we're doing things, we're impacting riders less. We also provided free shuttle bus service for those riding, and we had real-time information on our website, and we did open on schedule on May 25th.
Holly, when you do these kinds of things, I mean, everyone's a little different depending on duration and how many riders you have, but what kind of feedback do you get from riders? Is it just a little bit of like grumpiness because they're inconvenienced, but are you satisfied, I guess, with the way you handle we're gonna do this, now we're doing it, now we're not, now it's over, here's what you do in the meantime?
I mean, we're continually working to improve that. We really focused on where signs are located at our station so that folks know where to catch the shuttle bus. That's a big issue that we've had in the past, is we say, okay, go catch the shuttle bus. Great, where? It doesn't come to the station. And so we've been working on the wayfinding associated with that. The real-time information for the shuttle is fairly new. It's something we've been able to accomplish over the past year, and so that's another way. So riders are grumpy. It takes longer for sure. But the feedback generally that we get is people appreciate. In particular, I want to shout out our light rail field supervision, who is on site managing the bus bridge. They're incredibly professional and fantastic. One of our new employees didn't realize that we had the shutdown, was going to the airport, got caught in the shuttle and didn't know what was going on. The field supervisor helped her out, introduced herself, and it was just to express that, yes, it was a little inconvenient, but the team did a great job of handling it.
Thanks. Yep, Mike, sorry.
Because the MTA has, like, between the light rail and the metro system, I see you give the update on the track work. For the rest of this year, do you have any updates on future shutdown or track work that will be done that will impact the public?
For the metro in particular, we're going to be putting out when we have specific dates later this year, but in the fall, we're going to be doing a series of weekend shutdowns for the new metro rail cars and the signal system to put in place. And so we have, I think it's 3 this year and 4 next year, but a series of weekend shutdowns that are going to be occurring. And so we'll make sure that we're going to put that out well in advance so that riders are able to be prepared. We also participated in and celebrated Bikes Work Week. MTA has been a big participant in this. And a lot of people ask, like, well, why does MTA care about bikes? Bikes and transit go really well together. It helps with that first last mile connection. And we've been making a number of strides over the past few years to make sure that bikes are more accepted and accessible on our vehicles and our stations. We did host a Bike to Work pit stop at Penn Station on May 16th. A lot of folks came out for that. We always take our bus rack, the bus bike rack, to these events. Because I will tell you, I've done it a few times. It's still very intimidating putting your bike on the bus rack when there's a whole bus full of people waiting. And so we use this as an opportunity to educate people on how to do it in what is theoretically a less stressful situation. So we got a lot of good feedback on that. We also participated in the mayor's Bike to Work. I was biking in, we all live on Hartford Road, and Councilman Dorsey and Mayor Scott caught up with me, so that was fun. And participated in that press conference there. I will note all of our rail stations now have bike racks, so that's new as of this year, and we're still in the process of retrofitting several of our MERP 2, our low floor, our single level smart cars into bike cars. They'll each have 25 bike racks. So those should start rolling out this fall. And the goal is that every peak period or every Penn Line train and most peak period trains on the Camden Brunswick lines will have those bike cars on them.
Holly, what are you doing? How do you do you keep track of the usage of the bike racks, either on the cars or on the buses? Is there some data that is available? Is that something someone's actually tracking?
Not on the buses. I think on MARC, we have a little bit more data in terms of, you know, how often they're full, but on the buses, it's hard for them to keep track of. Yeah, I know on MARC in particular, there's a lot of desire to have additional bike cars, and that's really what we're.
Well, then subjectively with respect to the buses, do you feel like, I mean, how often, you know, are they used regularly with some, you know, frequency?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, as a rider, I see bikes on the racks pretty frequently.
Yeah.
There's been times when I've wanted to put my bike on a rack going home and there's two on each bus, they've been full. So it's like, okay, let me just bike instead. But yeah, I mean, they are, I would say, used fairly frequently.
Thank you.
We also really strive to celebrate our employees at MTA. So we have what we call the Superstars program. And this is a quarterly employee recognition program to recognize our top performing operators in particular. There's a number of performance indicators that we use, including attendance. Have they had any preventable accidents or citations? So really focus on safety. Are they early or not early? We're really pushing early is within our control, so don't operate early. And so how often are they early? Are they leaving their first stop on time? Are they compliant with their layovers, other safety compliance metrics? So it really is the best of the best. We have so many fantastic employees, but these are the ones that like the numbers just kind of rise to the top. So just want to share, you know, this is the most recent set of operators who were recognized. We bring them in on a quarterly basis, treat them to lunch, and they get a certificate, book bag. And then at the Transit Worker Appreciation Week next year, they'll get a gold trophy. So just trying to, again, recognize that good behavior that we want to continue to support. And this is just a lot of other updates on this page. So on the red line, we are continuing to move full steam ahead with that project. We announced the makeup of the community advisory team on May 16th. It was close to 300 applicants, so getting that down to 25 people was quite the challenge. And I just want to thank our regional partners for their assistance in that. The kickoff meeting for that will be June 15th. So, you know, again, excited to get that going, and we'll be inviting elected officials in if they want to chat with the group before they kick off at that meeting. We also hired our Executive Director of Transit Development and Delivery. So this is the person who's going to oversee both the Red Line and the Purple Line and Southern Maryland Rapid Transit. And when we get the North-South Corridor, all the future projects that we want to do. So Martha Gross joined us from the Virginia Department of Transportation. She's been here, I think, 3 weeks now, has already been fantastic and is diving right in and has just so much external experience that she's able to bring to this. So I'm very excited about that.
Holly, can you tell me how's this community advisory team gonna work?
So they're gonna, yeah, so it's made up of 25 folks throughout the corridor. So we tried for geographic diversity along the corridor. We looked for, you know, folks who represent community groups. We have a lot of folks who are involved with like faith communities. And so the goal for this group is basically helping us to understand what the communities are looking for, helping us to kind of be that voice and champion in the community for ways that we may not be able to otherwise. We did this the first time around with the Red Line and it was very successful. We want to educate this group a little bit as well. So maybe potentially take them on some field trips so that they can understand how it works in other cities, how major projects are done, and really help us be that trusted on the ground voice in communities, because like they live there, they know their neighbors in a way that we don't.
Yeah.
On the Red Line as well, we did announce yesterday, we took a contract to the Board of Public Works for a program management consultant that's going to help us to deliver the project. And we announced that the general notice for the supplemental environmental impact statement was published in the Federal Register last week. So again, lots of great progress. The project is continuing to move forward, and we should have a mode announcement later this month. On the Purple Line, I know this isn't in this area, but do just want to celebrate that project as well is continuing to move forward. The regional connectivity that will bring is still super fantastic, even for residents here. And so we celebrated the Talbot Avenue Bridge reopening there, which is a connection between two communities that historically haven't been connected. And there's been, it's a very intentional connection that we celebrated there with the community, and it was fantastic. One of the first milestones for the Purple Line this year. There'll be a lot more that's coming, as it's a big year for the Purple Line. We also received national recognition from the American Council of Engineering Companies, ACEC, for the Mark Riverside Heavy Maintenance Building. We had a team that went down to DC and received that recognition, so just want to shout them out. We worked again with the city to support Preakness. So we ran shuttles to and from light rail and to and from Metro for Preakness, got a lot of really great feedback from that. And so those who did use it appreciated that service. We also are launching employee resource groups at the agency. This is something that's done at a lot of private companies really around the country, but MTA is new to this. So we have now launched our first two. We have a veterans resource group. We have a women's in transit employee resource group, and we're launching a LGBT resource group to kind of coincide with Pride Month. We are celebrating National Safety Month. You'll see that I am wearing green today because on Fridays we wear green. Go Green for Safety is the National Safety Council initiative and push for folks to wear green, take a picture, post about it, and really kind of push that safety culture, which is incredibly important at our agency. And then finally, I'll end, it is June, so happy Pride to those who celebrate. MTA will be participating again in the Pride Parade on June 15th. This will be our third year doing it. It's been such a fantastic way to support our employees and our riders. We also, spoiler, it's gonna come out later today, but we'll be doing a Pride giveaway of a t-shirt, some sunglasses, a few other things. So just trying to get people to take pictures and send them to us and share of, hey, everyone's welcome on transit. That was a lot. Anything else anyone has questions about?
Good. Well, congratulations on lots of good stuff. Are you also doing the, do we have a packet behind this, just some data?
I think the discussion was that you wanted us to share it, but not go over it.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the data.
No, that's fine. I mean, so it's a bunch of line graph, I put the word line graphs, but and obviously they're not going to change very, very much month to month, and we're going to see them every month. So I guess what I would say going forward is that's perfectly fine. I think we did say that. You probably, if there's anything you want to call to our attention, you should call it, and then we should put it on the actual agenda every third month on. You can decide if it makes sense, just to make sure that we're actually taking a look at them. But I think it's fine if the commission's okay to have them come in.
Yeah, so the one thing I would highlight in the data, ridership, we did hit a post-COVID ridership high in May. Mobility, MARC, and commuter bus as modes, all individually as well, post-COVID highs. So again, riders are coming back. They are recognizing the importance of the system. We're pushing really hard, especially with some of the traffic impacts of the Key Bridge, where folks who maybe haven't considered MARC in a while to reconsider that. And so we are seeing that difference in terms of riders returning to the system. John's also telling me I should highlight on the hiring side. I mean, I've been saying this for a while, hiring continues to go really well. I think right now, the numbers as of yesterday were we had 119 operators in training. So we are running 3 classes. Our union instructors are complaining to me about how hard I'm making them work. But we are really trying to get as many folks in the door as we can. Our cut service continues to trend down in the right direction. Our service delivery up, up. Either way, if we can continue our hiring trends, continue our trends, we should later this fall be on track to hit less than 1% of cut service. So that really is the goal, is improving reliability, and we are on the right path. Trust the process. We're getting there.
Thanks. Yes, all right, good.
Yeah, so just one question about that, because that's pretty good if compared to other agencies, it seems, in the nation. So can you already operate all your services with the shortage that you have, or do you need additional drivers for this still?
So we're still cutting about, I think yesterday was about 3% of our bus service. Our goal is less than 1. We want 99% plus service delivery. So again, if we can continue this trend, we should be on track by September to be at that service delivery level we're looking for.
Folks may recall, and if DeAndrea is not here today, but she at the last meeting highlighted the distinction between vacancy and absenteeism, which is something we do want to keep an eye on, because obviously folks aren't there regardless if the reason, they're not there. So at some point, we wanna just kind of stay connected to that question. And to what extent it's a vacancy issue, to what extent it's an absentee issue, and how that relates to, what you would normally expect, because there's always gonna be some vacancy and some absenteeism, so.
I mean, it really is tied together. So our goal right now with the hiring is get it, so in terms of vacancy, right? So absenteeism, between planned and unplanned absences, it's about 22% of folks not available every single day. So our goal is to hire enough so that we have what's called an extra board of 25%, so that when those 22% don't show up for whatever reason or are in training or aren't available, we have enough operators to still run on the scheduled service. So, both are the focus, but the hiring really does matter. You just need enough folks to fill those seats.
And I just wanted to say, sort of more of a general protocols thing. We are, first of all, thank you MTA for getting us this information. I mean, we're trying to develop the right rhythm, the right, sharing of information. MTA has been great at getting us this, and also as that little discussion about the graphs just indicated, we're trying to figure out what can be submitted in writing, what needs to be presented orally. So, trying to find the right balance there, and also trying to develop some sort of a template, if you will, so that you're getting the information in a somewhat consistent way from meeting to meeting, but always leaving the administrator the opportunity to highlight things within those categories or to highlight things that are not related to those categories. So we're sort of working on that. I mean, I think it's going perfectly fine, but if anybody has any specific questions or recommendations about could we be seeing this, could we be seeing that by topic or whatever, just let Don or me know and we'll pass it along. Trying to find the right balance. Yeah, sorry, yeah, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. It's probably more towards the board as opposed to MTA regarding the red line, noting that there's going to be a mode announcement forthcoming. This commission has an advocacy opportunity. Are we going to be looking to maybe take a position in support or preference of a particular mode for the red line, or figure out how we can support decisions that are made as the red line progresses? I just question on whether or not we want to, and if we do, how that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna have to discuss that both with MTA and MDOT and here. The problem is, frankly, that those decisions are being made with the benefit of all sorts of data that we don't really have, and I'm just concerned about having us sort of weigh in on a more either a visceral basis, or some folks around the table might have more data than others. So clearly, we're going to be supporting MTA. I hope that we're just going to be able to support what MTA's decision is regarding the mode. But I think sort of expressing an opinion on the mode starts to get pretty complicated pretty fast, considering that we're not really equipped. So let's talk about the mode let's talk about the announcement, which should be made at the next meeting, and we'll figure out sort of what the commission is willing to do behind that. Thank you for asking. It's an important question.
And regarding the announcement, I think I said before that we would be extending an invite, so that is still the case. So look for that to come in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
The data, for the mobility numbers, you have two charts for on-time performance and then fixed route equipment. I just wanted to make sure I understood how you're translating to trying to put it into fixed route equivalency. Even though obviously it doesn't run that way, I just wanted to make sure I understand, because obviously it's a lower performance when you pull it that way, so I was curious about that.
So fixed route equivalency is basically kind of what it sounds like. How long would it take you to make this trip if you were able to use the fixed route? I would say on bus, we tend to compare fairly well. We don't do as well against like a subway ride, because like getting from Owings Mills to downtown in 30 minutes, you cannot do that in a car, honestly. And so those kind of numbers hurt us.
So this is against bus and rail.
It's against bus and rail, so it's against any of our fixed route, essentially how long, and we use a Google Maps calculator, but how long, our system does it, but how long would it take you to make that trip on fixed route, and then compare that to how long it actually takes on the mobility system.
Okay.
So ideally, our goal is above 85%, so we're trying to keep it pretty close. There are some things where, again, like rail travels faster than bus does.
And this poses brings up another question. I recently became aware being in Howard County and then hearing, and can't repeat all the details, but there are different policies, and I don't know if it's truly legislation, but there's some constraints around the ability to use rideshare in order to support this service, because my experience in other places is that rideshare actually, and I've seen it used where, there's vouchers, and so that's an ability to actually up the service, right? The recipient of who's getting a higher quality service, but there's some constraint around that. Is that accurate?
Yes, so there is a state law in Maryland specific to MTA. So there are other agencies in Maryland who are providing service on Uber and Lyft. The state law in Maryland prohibits MTA from using anyone to transport people with disabilities unless they have a specific type of fingerprint background check. The Public Service Commission, when Uber and Lyft were coming into the state, actually did a really great job of ensuring background checks and that people would be safe. It's a different type of background check though. So it's not the fingerprint one. I would argue, and I think a lot of privacy experts would argue, that the PSC did a better job than the fingerprint one, but state law doesn't allow us unless they're willing to do the fingerprint. Uber and Lyft, I think rightfully so, their drivers do not want to go through that extra step of doing it. And so currently we can't provide rides on Uber and Lyft, even though our riders is something that they would like.
So would you generally, I mean, it's a general question, but if you had access to that, this service level would go up?
Yeah, so we would bring them on as supplemental service and similar to like the caller ride, something that our riders can opt into. So if folks do not want to use it, they want the traditional mobility van that will show up and pick them up. But having that option to opt into is something our riders are looking at. It would definitely improve our ability to provide service and improve our rider satisfaction.
Thank you.
Right, great. So Don, we're gonna talk about the budget process. Let me just, very quick introduction to this. I think everybody saw my letter to the Secretary and the Administrator on behalf of the Commission, trying to kick off the Commission's role with respect to the budget process. The letter acknowledges, and it is of course true, that this has never been done before. MTA has never had to sort of engage with an entity on the way to the development of its budget, same for MDOT. What the statute requires is that we see it basically prior to the draft CTP, let alone, of course, the final CTP. That's going to require a little bit of consideration by MDOT and MTA about how it wants to do that. So they're actively doing that in a very cooperative way. There's a letter in your packets that was just received yesterday, I think, 2 days ago, from Secretary Wiedefeld, responding to the letter and pledging support to work with us in that process. And the DMC staff is working actively with MTA and MDOT to sort all that out. We expect a presentation in July from MTA or MDOT or both about sort of what that looks like, how we get the process going, and to start to look at budget proposals and numbers. So we don't have that today, but what we do have is Don Halligan, who's going to just give us an overview. I think these are slides that we used previously, very early in the Commission's life, but we thought it would be useful in anticipation of next month, just do a quick refresh of the overall approach. And then next month, we're going to seriously get into what the Commission's role is and how we can be constructive in the process of MTA developing its budget. Does the Assistant Secretary want to say anything about that? Is that accurate?
No, I think everything you said is accurate. The Secretary definitely wants to make sure that we have the Commission involved to the extent possible, just with the caveat that, as part of the Train Commission's recommendation, they did talk about the Consolidated Transportation Program and ways that we can make changes to make it easier and more accessible to just about everybody in terms of the process and how we do things. And so what you'll get next month is a presentation that could very well may change due to the fact that the Train made the recommendation that we need to look at this a little bit closer. So.
Yeah. Thanks. Holly, do you want to add anything to that?
No, Secretary
you captured it well. You know, we'll be happy to present. I believe MDOT will present in May or in July, sorry. Went backwards in time and then we'll get the meeting after that.
You know, we understand that it's new. We understand that everybody's got to sort of figure this out as we go along. I think MTA and MDOT also understand that the statute gives us the obligation, the right to participate meaningfully in this process. And we're just all gonna figure out how that goes this first cycle, and I'm confident that it's gonna be constructive. So looking forward to that, and I'll turn it over to Don, just to talk a little bit about the overall context for this once again.
Sure, thank you. And that was a good framing. I just want to spend a few minutes going back over a presentation that I gave in February at our first meeting, and I know there was a lot at that first meeting, so I'm hoping that this can kind of be a short refresher. And I wanted to talk about the Transportation Trust Fund and the CTP together because they operate together. So what is the Transportation Trust Fund, or the TTF? It's a non-lapsing special fund that provides funding for transportation in the state. It's regardless of mode. It is an account that was set up in 1971, dedicated to the Department of Transportation and its 6 business units. It has flexibility and diversity to meet those needs over time. It has many sources of funds. Motor fuel is a big one. Operating revenues, rental car tax, federal aid is a big one. Motor vehicle registration and fees, corporate income tax, and bond sales. Skip this one because I just talked about it. So as you know, the department is set up of modal units. MTA is one of them. Also includes the Aviation Administration that owns and operates the airport, Baltimore, MTA, Motor Vehicle Administration, and the State Highway Administration has these cousins. The Transportation Authority that owns and operates the tunnels and bridges, toll tunnels and bridges in the state, and funds the WMATA compact. It is part of a larger plan. It's part of the state report on transportation that is given. The CTP is given to the General Assembly and the governor every year. That includes the department's long-range transportation plan, the CTP Consolidated Transportation Program, and the annual attainment report. This is a graphic out of the CTP this year. You can see where money comes from and where it goes. As you see, the biggest sources here are this year, or in this program, are federal aid and motor fuel taxes and vehicle titling fees comprise, with registration fees comprise over 50%. This is a graphic that the department's provided, and I think where they are at the moment in terms of the process. You can see it's a continuing process that begins with requests that were received in the department within the modal administrations, and then priority letters that are received from the local governments. They get their allocations, modal administrations get their allocations in June and July. We'll hear about MTAs in July. And then a draft CTP is put together and issued by September 1st of the year. And through the fall, they do tours with the local governments, meeting and discussing the draft. And then they present the final CTP to the General Assembly in January. That is generally the process. We are again going to hear from the department next month in the next month's meeting about MTAs. Any questions?
No, I think Don definitely did a really good overview, just looking at some of the engagement steps in that process, you know, those county priority letters. And each of you also represent one of the counties that are part of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. And so just thinking through, which we'll probably talk about a little bit more at the next meeting, just thinking about engagement for the BRTC. And, those priority letters when they're coming in, although it may not be, in time for this year, is something that you may want to take a look at or work with your counties in the city of Baltimore and what those submittals are, especially for the MTA. And also just thinking through the engagement with the CTP tours to all the counties in Baltimore City. It's a process where each county or city does it a little different, but there's also, for most of them, a public engagement portion of that process. And, just trying to think through where this commission can also be helpful with that process. So just some things for thought for the next meeting when we also present.
And to that end, I think we intend to provide the commission with the priority letters next month.
I was just gonna ask that, so thank you.
Yeah, just a question about, this is probably more process focused, what you explained right now. When you explain like where the money comes from, will it also like explain where the future is heading in the process? For example, if you're saying that like 21% comes from motor fuel taxes and more vehicles go to electric, is that something that we'll hear about and how that impacts our budget, or?
That is something that the department routinely has talked about in the past several years at every tour meeting. And I would expect they'll say something next month.
Okay, other questions? Again, this is just a little bit of a refresher, whet your appetite. Hopefully, I'm really hoping to plow some new ground the next couple of meetings and see how we can be helpful and constructive in this budget process.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Aaron.
I guess as the counties put their letters together, I don't know if it to be a letter from us or from you to the county jurisdictions, just to remind them, you have representation on BRTC, maybe include the commissioners from the different jurisdictions in the conversations that they're having before the letter is written, or brief them before the letter is made public. I think it just might be helpful from a process standpoint, and it just gets the commission more directly involved with the local jurisdiction as they're.
That's a great idea. I mean, all these ideas, everybody's trying to make room for the commission's very existence and sort of what role we can play. So when you have these ideas like that one, let us know. Let's take note of that and let's figure out how we can communicate to the leadership in the jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank
you. Okay. Anybody else? All right, Don, thanks. Don is staying up there for a couple of items in a row regarding the MTA service changes. I guess, I'm sorry, the MTA is gonna do briefing on the process. And then Don's gonna talk a little bit about his perspective, having taken a review of it on behalf of the commission. So Daryl, please come on up, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daryl Clark. I am Director of Office of Service Development at MTA. And I'm gonna be going over the service planning, pretty much, a little bit of service planning 101, give you a high level of what we do in Office of Service Development and how we put together the proposals for the annual service plan. Like I said, it's a very high level. It's much more intricate than what I'm gonna show you. Takes a long time, but I'm gonna give you guys a quick glimpse into what we do. All right.
And I wanna shout out Daryl, he grew up in the city, went to Poly riding
Yes.
MTA service and is still a very frequent MTA rider. We have a little internal competition to see who rides the most, and I was doing great until he started, and then he surpassed me really quickly. So, very frequent rider and knows the system inside and out.
Thank you. So I'm gonna get into it. The Office of Service Development, our primary responsibility is just developing the routes and schedules for MTA. And that includes network level planning, bus stop management, the announcements and signs and other data that goes onto the buses, and creating schedules for the operators. So we take our schedules that we build and we break those up into shifts for the operators, for the bus operators. Right, and Office of Service Development is pretty much broken down into 3 different groups: planning, scheduling, and transit data systems. Planning side is covering bus stop management, the service changes, the overall network design, and recommendations to improve services. While scheduling is pretty much straightforward. They do the route scheduling, trip building, bunch of things to build the schedule and build those operator schedules. In the transit data systems team, they work on statewide and federal map networks. They handle the ADA announcements on the buses, the PSAs, schedule data on buses, and the head signs. So when the bus is approaching, our riders know where it's going. And here is pretty much a schedule of our year. We do 3 service changes a year. And that is determined pretty much by our collective bargaining agreement. It's scheduled that way. And we do like a summer's change and a fall change. The fall change is our big change. Those coincide with the school year. So our summer change starts when the school year ends. Fall change starts when the school year starts, of course. And then the winter change is just an intermittent change to kind of refresh the schedules, give the operators a chance to pick a different schedule. And you can see these changes, they do take some time to create. So takes about 6 months. We go through a big service assessments evaluation period where we're just evaluating and figuring out what we're gonna do for that next schedule change. And then we go through the schedule development, just building those schedules, and then we do a lot of QA, QC, and then we implement. All right, and then of course for the annual service plan that's associated with the fall schedule change, we pretty much start the October before that year. So for this one that we're doing now for fall 24, we started October 23. And we look at a lot of data from the previous year and a lot of the comments from our riders, our customers, and we come up with proposals and we vet those really hard internally. And then we start to share those out and do public hearings. All right, our MTA service planning goals, we pretty much have 3 pillars that we stand on. The first one is equity, right? And equity is just making sure that we connect people to where they want to go, to the jobs that they need to get to, and other services like hospitals, stores, markets, things like that, to see their family. The second pillar is reliability. We want to make sure our service is reliable and cut down on the travel time as much as possible. If you ride the bus, you know that it does take a little bit more time than driving a car. So that's why it's a little bit difficult to get people out of their cars onto the buses, but we're always looking to improve that travel time and just improve reliability. So when we say the bus is gonna be there, it's gonna be there. All right, and the last one is adapting. We always want to adapt to changing travel patterns and the riders' needs, especially post-pandemic. You know, during the pandemic, a lot of people went home, they were teleworking. Now a lot of people are going back to work, and as you know, companies are changing the way they do things. A lot of locations have changed, a lot of new places popping up. So we always wanna keep our ear to the street, looking for those beaten paths where people are going, and that's where we wanna run our service. And this is one of the tools that we use when we are developing our proposals and our improvements or adjustments to routes. This is the equity matrix. And right now you can see we just have all of our modes in there, but normally what we do is we throw each route into this equity matrix. And this is just gonna give us a high level view of what improvements or what changes we can make to that route, right? If it's I don't wanna get into it, but if it's like high equity, you know, we don't wanna change it too much because we know that a lot of people are depending on that route, right? All right, and the benefits of good scheduling, right? So we pretty much, scheduling is a balancing act. We're trying to find that sweet spot in between the agency's goals, the CBA that we have with the union, trying to match their rules and their guidance for their operators, And also our resources, you know, our number of buses and number of operators that we have. So we try to find that sweet spot to make great schedules, and when we do make those great schedules, the outcome is increased on-time performance, so those buses are much more reliable. We increase the efficiency of our resources. We're not, you know, we're using our buses to the best of their ability. Minimizing out of service time, which means that most of the time the buses on the road, we want them to be in service, we want them to be revenue. So they're actually carrying riders and just not riding around the city doing nothing. Right, and then we also increase our operator satisfaction by creating better schedules for them. And I'm a firm believer, if we take care of our operators are gonna take care of our riders, right?
I got a quick question.
Yes.
So let's say hypothetically,
Yes,
there's a huge employer and there's a need for a bus, you know what I mean? They're all parking. How does that process work? Cause I've kind of lived through kind of a long drawn out process, I think, in it.
It's not a, in that case, it wouldn't be, for example, Harbor Logistics that opened up on East Patapsco Avenue, they contacted us, they say, hey, we're opening up a bunch of warehouses, Home Chef was the first warehouse to open. So what we did was, we talked to them, they were anticipating 500 workers. We just created a pilot so we can start it a little bit early. And right now, that's actually a part of our proposals this year on the 73 line. We're just making it permanent now. You know, so we created a pilot. We kind of baby stepped the trips there. We started out with just trips based on their shifts. And as they ramped up their hiring, As they ramped up their hiring, we moved to every trip going into Harbor Logistics. So now that's just a proposal just to make it permanent, not a pilot. So we do have the ability to pivot pretty quickly if we need to, if something's opening up, and just create like a pilot for it.
I do wanna note that is within the service area.
Yeah, within the service area, of course,
When it's
within our
something
core
that's-
service area, like
Yeah.
we wouldn't run a trip to DC, of course.
A
Yes, ma'am.
follow-on question, just in your example, you said, you know, the employer contacted you.
Yes.
But I assume that in your core service area, you're kind of always paying attention and tracking, is a redevelopment happening, is a new occupant coming in? And so if they don't contact you, you might reach out proactively, is that accurate?
Oh, definitely. We have a lot of channels of getting information. We actually spoke to them years ago, even before I was in this position. It was building, so we knew that it was coming, but then they just contacted me while I was in this seat and just let me know, hey, this is the date we're actually gonna be opening. So we just reacted to that. All right?
And I have a quick question on your previous slide.
Yes, you want me to go back or?
Sure,
Is
I
it this
see that
slide?
on the tool, the baseline is 2019 for ridership. I know that's the golden year pre-COVID. Is that the main reason why you're using 2019?
No, this is just an example.
Okay, so it's not.
Yeah, I mean, we do this every year. It's
Okay.
just, we just pulled something that's happened to be from 2019.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Can I ask you one, just a question, you don't have to go back, but
No problem.
you got summer and winter service change reviews, those are minor, and then fall service changes divided into minor versus major, which means you're not really doing the major service changes except they're in the fall cycle, correct?
Yes.
What's the difference between minor and major? What's the?
Well, a
makes it-
minor service change, we're pretty much just optimizing the service. We may make some runtime changes, things of that nature, but a major change is we're gonna make some alignment changes. We may add a new route. There's gonna be major bus stop changes, maybe, things of that nature.
It basically doesn't require a public hearing,
Right.
Like, does
Yeah.
it hit the threshold where we have to do a public hearing?
Does
And
that come from some statute or regulation?
So,
Yes.
So. Okay, so you're doing, so that means that you are, by definition, then you are not doing anything that qualifies as a major except on the annual fall cycle.
that's
You're only
correct.
doing, right, only once a year.
Once a year.
But
We used to do it more frequently and we found that it was confusing for riders. It was
Right.
not helpful
was-
for longer term planning. And so we've switched to this model, which I think has worked pretty well.
I don't have any objection or concern about the once a year, but are there situations in which you feel like something is merited within the 1 year and have you done like one-off things, meet the public notice requirement, et cetera, et cetera? Is there anything happen like that, like a major employer, or is that that typically is a couple of years lead time,
So Daryl mentioned the pilots, so we do use pilots in such a way, and when he gets into this fall service change, you'll hear him talk a lot. Most of the things that we're doing that we're proposing are actually already have happened. And it is just making them permanent through the public hearing process.
Gotcha, okay.
But yes, if we felt like we needed to do a major change in a public comment period, we would do that. This is just the process we prefer to follow.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Right, good.
Next example is, this is just an example, a snapshot of what our schedulers look at on a regular basis. Every row here is a block of trips, and you can see every little colored square is like a trip. And they just break that down into schedules for the operator. So this is what takes a long time. This is what takes most of the time for us to get our work done. And this is much more big. This is a very small snapshot. We normally deal with about 500 to 600 blocks like this that we have to break down between the 4 bus divisions.
I want to say thank you for this eye test. It's very.
The takeaway here is scheduling is hard.
Right. This is another tool that we use. This is a trip matrix pretty much. And what it is what we look for is that the concentration of these blue dots is gonna hit that green line. That green line represents the end of the trip. So this just gives us a indication where our on-time performance is and what's going on with our on-time performance. So we look at this for every route, for every trip. Every row again is a separate trip. And we just wanna make sure that we are hitting our targets, which is that green line.
Question.
Yes.
For the trip performance, is that the staffing affects that the most? Is it, what factors go into poor performance on that? What's the biggest driver?
The biggest thing I think for my department is run times, right? So we want to make sure that we appropriately allocate enough time for each trip to get from the start to the end and hit all the time points in between. Because that makes the ride better for our riders. Our riders know when the bus is gonna come, they know when to expect to get to their destination.
So if I can add on, so I mean, what you're seeing here is this is runtime. So the blue dots are every single real time. So
Right.
it is tracking in real time when the bus actually hit there. And the run times are impacted by so many things. Traffic is a big piece of it, right? So school traffic every fall, and it takes a while for it to like calm back down. But the goal is to set the schedule so that the operator basically gets to the layover to the end of the line exactly when we thought they would. So they're hitting their time points along the way. But I would say traffic is a big piece. How many riders there are also matters, right? Because you have to like wait and load for folks to get on. We do also look at traffic lights. So like how long are they stuck at any particular traffic light? Like there's some where, you know, Liz and her team are taking a look and where we might want to reach out to the city and be like, hey, can we get signal preemption here? Or could we get like a queue jump to try and jump ahead to help us keep on this.
And the work you guys did on like main corridors, like I think Pratt, now there's some of the white pieces, is that something that can be scaled or is it just, it's too cumbersome or complicated?
I would love to do more bus routes, bus lanes all throughout the city. We have our transit priority initiative toolkit where we've identified a number of routes that would benefit from interventions. So ranging from dedicated bus lanes, queue jumps, bus bulbs, all of the above that would help us just speed up service.
Next is some of the constraints that we deal with in service development. The first one is our resource constraints. Of course, we have a finite number of buses and operators. So we always have to make sure that we aren't overscheduling where we can't, realistically perform the schedule that we're putting out. We also have the collective bargaining agreement with the union, which lays out parameters on how and when we can make our changes. Like I said, the schedule change dates are part of the collective bargaining agreement, so we have to make those schedule changes on those dates that are assigned to it. And then just physical constraints to roadways and available stop space. A lot of times, we do get requests to add a new bus line or add a new alignment on a different street or something like that, that it's not really conducive for buses to go down, or it's not safe, it causes unsafe turns and things like that. Or even just adding stops. We have to make sure every stop is accessible for everyone, and a lot of times stops, streets don't have enough space to be an accessible stop, and we can't, avoid everyone. All right, another planning constraint. is the balancing act between frequency and coverage. So I have two illustrations up here. The first one is maximum ridership, where you get a lot of frequency. You see there's buses are running on two lines, so there's like two routes, and we can allocate like a lot of resources to that, a lot of buses to that route so they can run more frequent. The bottom is maximum coverage. That's where you're gonna put the buses on more streets so that riders are closer to the routes. They don't have to walk as much. But in that case, you can't run as frequent as you as you like to all the time. So you're gonna have less frequency, but more coverage. So that's something our planning group always struggles to balance every year to make sure that we are hitting that sweet spot between frequency and coverage in the city. Yes.
As a commission, can we give then also input on how to connect maybe between the two alternatives? If there is good like pet connection, for example, that will help you, for example, I can
Right.
imagine, right? If more people can get to the stops through safe streets or bikeways. Is there anything that we will see in that process where that is a limitation and where we can also give advice? I don't know if we give advice to anyone outside of MTA for that matter, but maybe more to Andor. Is that something that we can get insight, that we will get insight in over time in this process?
Well, that's a good question. We're all figuring this out, right? And especially this first cycle. And I think we have to figure out how we are specifically, as you'll hear in a minute, because Don's done some pre-digestion. We're specifically charged to review and comment on service change requests, plans, as well as sort of the related matters. And the question is how we figure, like, we're not gonna get involved presumably in the computer model. Like, there's, the question is what's the right level for us to, so I was actually going to ask, and I'll ask it now, you can put a pin in it. How does MTA think the commission can constructively engage in this without getting into the micromanagement level that's not practical or appropriate? And you're talking about something even a little different, which is maybe extra MTA outside of MTA, how to help make those connections. And there, I guess it's certainly possible, depending on what you tell us about your own engagement, that the commission can say, in June, MTA reported to us that it would be helpful if this other thing happened. And the commission is gonna reach out and weigh in and see if we can help assist that other thing. So I don't know, and that's the kind of stuff I'm thinking about.
Yeah,
So I need some guidance.
I think in particular on your comment, Arhan, the Be More bus that Liz presented on last month is still in development. I think it'd be helpful later this fall to come back and talk again. One of the things that we're gonna have in that plan is not just what we think MTA can do to improve service, but also what the city, the county, the local roadway owners can do, right? Like, we can't just take space for dedicated bus lanes without the roadway owner giving this to us. The city's been a good partner. I think there's still room for more, because we always want more bus lanes, and so we're gonna keep coming back and asking for more. And I think engagement in that way with those roadway owners would be very helpful for us.
So I guess the open question, which I'm asking everybody to think about, is, it's gonna happen as we open the door on a bunch of these, sort of folder, on a bunch of these things that are in our statutory charge. What is the right altitude level, for the commission to engage in, and how can we be helpful? Because it's not our intent to, as we've said many times, to micromanage, and it's not practical. But the question is, where's the value add? Where can we really help make a difference for something that MTA for some reason can't do on its own for some constraint or whatever, so.
I mean, I think, having the feedback in terms of, frequency versus coverage is a constant debate that every transit agency is trying to balance and have. Right now, with existing resources, you're moving the deck chairs, right? Like, in order to do something here, we have to take from something there, and that's essentially what we're doing. The Be More bus plan, the goal of that is to advocate and give folks something to advocate for more and better. And so I do think leaning in on that in terms of, if we want to deliver, whether it's contracted services or microtransit or more operators and buses, the advocacy around that, so that we're not just rearranging the deck chairs, is really what will ultimately make a difference long-term for the region.
And I agree. I think the big thing for this group would be advocacy, because I feel like I'm gonna be back more. And we're gonna talk about new changes and new proposals and things like that, like things that we would like to do. And if you can advocate for that, to make sure that we get those infrastructure changes or whatever we need to push forward and make the system better, that would be awesome.
And I wanna just note, like, I don't want to de-emphasize the importance of infrastructure. You know, with dedicated bus lanes, we've seen a 10% travel time improvement. That means that it takes less buses to run the same level of service. And so every less bus that we have to use, we can then plow that into more service and more frequency, more expanded coverage where folks wanna go. And so the more that the region can continue to dedicate space to transit and then help us to enforce that space for transit, allows us to use the resources that we have. So just, you know, I don't want to let that go with a focus of just on the service MTA can provide. You know, we're partners in that, but we do need the roadway owners to make those decisions.
I would just say, I don't wanna keep going, but what I'm trying to get people in the mindset of is when you have things like this, somewhere on the checklist, how can the commission be helpful? You know, what is it that we can do because of where we sit that is different from where you sit or other people sit as a new player on the scene? You know, and it's almost like, if you wanna be helpful, you could do this, and we'll say, well, you know, we don't agree, potentially. We agree, but we can't do anything about it. We agree and we're gonna give it our best shot, you know, I'm asking MTA to think about that, and for others involved to think about that as well. So if you could just kind of factor that into your planning, that would be very helpful. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Next is our annual service plan test for the year. This is all the things that we do. I'm not gonna get into the details of it. But where we are is right here. We just held our public hearings, and now the open public comment period is open. I'm sorry. But the public comment period is open. So we're accepting comments right now. We're gonna be taking those in and we're gonna be reviewing them up against our proposals before we make our final decisions on what we're gonna implement. Yes, please.
Without going into a deep dive,
Yes.
what is MTA's approach to incorporating the equity framework? What does that look like? Just, you can give me the helicopter view.
Well, the equity framework, I don't wanna skip forward too much, but
You're gonna hit it later. If you are, then we can pause.
just a little bit, but I mean, every proposal that we come up with, we do an equity analysis on it using that framework, and we decide whether or not we wanna move forward with that proposal based on that. So, I mean, we're not gonna propose anything that's gonna disparage any riders or, you know, make it more difficult for anyone to use the bus if we're going through corridors where customers really need that service.
If I could jump in at almost a higher level, because Daryl's, you know, on the ground with the bus scheduling that we take a look at. I think the commuter bus example most recently is a good example of using that equity framework. So if you remember, we compare all the modes against each other. Commuter bus is low equity and low equity score and low ridership. And so whenever we were faced with the decision of making budget cuts, we looked through an equity lens, and ultimately that's where we ended up making the decision to focus on commuter bus, is because it was scoring lower in terms of ridership and equity on that equity matrix. Then once we got some funding to keep routes, right? So we use that, each of the individual routes is also mapped on the equity matrix. It's not in the slides, but we have that as an equity framework that's online. When you see what we did ultimately propose for commuter bus, you'll see that the routes that scored lower in ridership and equity ended up being the ones that were proposed to be removed. So that is kind of one example of, like, again, at a higher level of most recently how we use that.
So at a higher level, what factors are in that equity analysis?
So we're looking at who's riding, right? So like income levels, do they have access to a car, race, disability status? I could keep going.
Geographic location,
Yep.
okay. All right, thank you.
And it's not just the data, it's a part of it is the data that we gather from our origin and destination surveys. Part of it is also census data. So we do look at that. It's not just MTA data that's being used. And then we, you know, if you keep going, we're adding in, like, does it have access to a hospital? Is it near a school? Is it near a library? Like
For
all
services today.
Yep, all of those things tie into it.
Completely understood. Thank you.
Daryl?
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
You said so.
Please go ahead.
All right, so our public outreach process is pretty extensive. We do print materials, we do car cards that we put on our vehicles. We do rider notices, schedules, and maps. We also do digital materials, of course, on the agency's website. We also do social media. We do a lot of public media, radio, television, and newspapers. There's a lot of displays at stations, at our rail stations. We also do the audio announcements. If you're listening to WTTZ at the station, there's always going to be a break between the smooth jazz to let you know what's going on. We also do stakeholder communication with advisory groups, elected officials, and civic organizations. And then we also do the public hearings every year for these, so that people can speak on our public proposals or give us their feedback.
Daryl,
Yes.
as you guys look at kind of the digital landscape, have you, and it may not be necessarily, some of this may be on the schedule, and some of it may just be on the promotion of the asset, but that kind of social micro-targeting, particularly as you look at reaching younger audiences, what's the strategy around TikTok, other spaces where
You handle that.
demographic may reside?
I'm not really into that part, but that goes out of my office.
So we do, so the state does not support TikTok, so we do not have
That's
a
it,
TikTok
TikTok.
presence.
Snapchat,
Yeah,
come on,
yeah,
whatever.
We're very active on, I think Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram are the most. We've been really pushing lately to get more on Instagram, since Instagram Reels seems to be a place where a lot of folks get information. So our marketing team is continuing to engage there. We have done some partnerships with like Live Baltimore to help him get more followers and get more folks kind of paying attention, and so continuing to push in there. I will say there's a lot of our riders still who read it in the Sun. They don't have the digital media at all. They just go out and they ride the bus, and that's how they get their information.
So proposed service changes. So after analyzing data and all the feedback we get, our proposed changes are pretty much put into these categories: increasing or decreasing frequency of service or just a given route, consolidating or adding bus stops, splitting routes or creating a short turn, or creating like route extensions or just a whole new route. And some of the factors that could trigger like frequency changes are very high or extremely low loads all day or during given hours or parts of the day. High delays at stops due to lots of riders boarding, so at those big trip generators. And then very high or low passengers per trip. So we're looking at it on a trip level and how many people are boarding each trip. When it comes to adding and consolidating stops, these are some of the factors that we look at. Just difficulty maintaining on-time performance due to stop frequency, geometric or safety issues. And when I say geometric, like safety issues, a lot of times our stops aren't the right size. They don't give us enough space. So you'll see like a bus into the stop, but like the back of the bus, like sitting out in traffic, so that kind of determines if, we want to do something else with that stop, if we want to consolidate it with another stop, or maybe just adjust that space on that stop. And then the distribution pattern of boarding and alighting. And here on this slide, we do have like 3 examples of our bus stop spacing for like our local service, like the local links and city links. Spacing between buses is about 600 to 1,200 feet, depending on the population density in the area. On our quick link routes, the stops are a little bit spaced a little further, up to like a mile. And then on our express bus link routes, we generally have like a loading zone, and then we have not a departure, but a offloading zone. I can't think of it for some reason. But those routes, they just pick up like downtown Baltimore, and they'll go out to the suburbs and start dropping off folks. All right, splitting or short turns. That may be something new to you guys, but when we split a route or we create a short term, some of those factors are when ridership or loads drop off abruptly. So in this picture, you can see like the whole route is here. And in black is probably where like most of our riders are going. So what we'll do is we'll figure like a short turn. And a lot of times it'll be like a shopping center or some big trip generator right there. So we'll run like, for example, like half of our trips just there so that bus can turn around and get people right back. Just creates more reliability in that route. And then a lot of trips on the route are short, a lot of trips on the route are short, and that's like rider trips are short as opposed to through trips where riders are going all the way from like the beginning to the end of the route. So we look at all of those factors when we're trying to determine how we want to adjust the route or make changes. All right, and then when it comes to adding service, these are some of the factors that we look at. Like we talked about with the 73, additional development or jobs. We look to extend service or create another route. And also when we get lots of public feedback or on a given connection. And something I mentioned early, like one of my colleagues always say, when you see a beaten path, you know that people are going to this place. So we want to make sure that we create a route that goes there so we can serve those folks that want to get to that location. All right, and here's slide about Title VI and the ASP. All ASP proposals have a Title VI analysis performed to ensure that they do not create a disparate impact or disproportionate burden on protected communities. And you can get more information. There's a website right there that you can read on that. And then performance monitoring. So every year we look at each route for potential changes and we use these key performance indicators. Ridership retention, that just means, you know, at some point this route carried this many people. Is it still carrying that many people? Is it trending higher? Is it trending lower? So we look at that. We also look at the equity value of the route. We look at the on-time performance, non-revenue trip efficiency. That's mainly trips that go from the division to the start of the line and vice versa. We look at capacity and we look at productive and unproductive or duplicated segments. And using these factors, we determine whether or not we should expand that route. Sometimes we just want to continue to monitor because sometimes it may just be like a blip. So we just want to see if it stays on trend before we take action on that route. And then we also look to see if there's space to reduce service or shorten it or create that short turn on that route.
Carol, before you get into the specifics of the service change, I want to ask you one question about the process. Presumably there's a great deal of technology that goes into this, some sort of piece of software or program or something. Is that like, do you have the tools you need? Is there like a off the shelf, everybody uses a product for this stuff? Do you have to develop it? Is it a hybrid? The question I'm just trying to understand, whether you have the right stuff.
Yeah, we do have the right tools. We use several pieces of software to get all the data that we need. I mean, that software is tailored to our needs. So we work with those vendors to make sure that they're giving us what we want. It's a lot of transit companies that do software and we work to make sure that we get the results from that software that we need. All right. And I'm gonna just get into I'm sure you guys are familiar with the proposals, but I'm kind of gonna just gloss over them real quick. There's some service enhancements and some service adjustments. The first one is the 73. I spoke about that. It's already happening. This bus is already going into Wagner's Point or the Harbor Logistics location. We're just making it permanent now. It's a pilot. We're gonna make it permanent. It is carrying a bunch of passengers. We speak with those folks over there on a regular basis. And they're happy with the service and we're possibly looking to increase it in the future as they build more locations open there. Local Link 85, we're gonna be extending that route to the North Avenue Light Rail. This is just gonna improve connections on the Northwest Baltimore. They can get straight to the light rail on that 85 without making a transfer. The next one is the 67 all-day service. Right now that service runs up until about 9 p.m. and then it breaks off and it starts up at about 2 p.m. But due to a lot of warehouses opening, they have Amazon that opened down there. We're just gonna run the service all day to meet the demand for their shifts. Then the Express Link 105, we're gonna be adding additional trips because of capacity. A lot of folks have been riding that service, which is pretty awesome. We just wanna make sure they have a safer, more comfortable ride. So we're gonna add some trips on that 105 Express bus link. The City Link Silver, this is something we changed last year. We moved it from Hanover Street to Light Street. We kind of immediately moved it back to Light Street due to a unsafe turn that was created. And this is just gonna make that permanent. So right now it's like a long-term detour, but we're gonna make it permanent. Next is City Link Lime. This is just a layover change on the short term for that City Link line. So we were laying over next to a loading dock and they just asked us to move because we're kind of blocking and making it difficult for their trucks to get in. So we're gonna just move over a little bit. It's not gonna make too much of a difference in our riders being able to get that bus. The local link 71, this is just rerouted through Baltimore Peninsula. Mission Boulevard was created, you know, new street network down there, and we just wanna make sure we serve it. So it's doing this right now, we're just gonna make it permanent. Transpoint Atlantic at TPA, the 63 and the 163 is just moving the layover. We were laying over in the lot next to the Royal Farms. That lot is slated to be developed. And TPA, they built us a stop right on Bethlehem Boulevard. It's really convenient. It's out of the way of traffic. It's still convenient to the Royal Farm, so our riders can still go there if they need to before they catch the bus. Our operators can still use the Royal Farms. So we're just gonna be making that permanent in the fall. In the Whispering Woods layover on the 59 and Express Bus Link 160, there was some safety hazards on a westbound bus stop on Eastern Boulevard and Tidewater. So that bus stop was taken away. So in order to make sure we accommodate our riders, we're just gonna lay over on the eastbound bus stop at Tidewater so that those riders in that community can still get to that bus. And then it's just gonna turn around at the Whispering Woods Loop and head back westbound. But this just prevents them from having to cross over the street, because most of the residents are on one side anyway, there's no residents on the other side. And then the 62, this is a big one, the 62, 65, 163, and 63. In the Dundalk area on, what is that, Center Place? The street network was really small. The buses was having a hard time getting through, especially with vehicles coming towards it. It was always like a showdown, like who goes first and things like that. So we're just gonna reroute it on Shipping Place to get around and avoid that area. And what we did is we created a new bus stop in that area to make sure that all of our riders, if they need to transfer from one bus to the other, they can still do that without having to walk anywhere. They can make that exchange at the same stop. And next steps, like I said, the public comment period is going on now. That's gonna close at midnight on July 8th. On August 12th, we'll have the final service changes and we'll announce those to the public, what we're gonna do after we review all those public comments. And then on August 25th, this will all go into effect on that Sunday. All right, question?
With the collapse of the key bridge.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, all of us have been impacted by the traffic there. I know I'm sitting in my car and long in traffic and all over the city, all over, you know, in the surrounding area.
Right.
How has that affected the schedules, and have you, or looking to make adjustments in the schedule areas?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we've already made adjustments for the summer schedule for the 163 and the 120 that go revenue service through the tunnel. So we've added time to it. We also looked at pretty much detouring it out of the tunnel, but it actually took more time to detour it outside of the tunnel. So we're just gonna add time to it. We're still looking at it every week. We're looking at the traffic and the time that the buses is taking, the on-time performance for those routes. And we're also redoing a lot of our not in service routes to avoid the tunnel, because we can give them a little bit more time to get to their first stop. Right. Anything else?
Thank you very much, really,
Thank you, guys.
really
Thank you for
informative, well
having me.
done.
All right.
We're very lucky to have Daryl.
Thank you.
So if you're still wondering why we're hearing so much about service changes, it's because that is a specific mandate of the charge of the commission to review and comment on service change reports and major service change proposals on a quarterly basis. We here at staff did review the proposed service changes and want to share some of our observations to their plan. The MTA's, this was noted, the MTA's comment period closes on July 8th, so we want to meet that deadline and provide comment. before then. The MTA created a really great document that outlined the changes and potential impacts, so it made our job pretty easy here. There are three types of changes they're mentioning: new routes, service enhancements, and service adjustments. One route that wasn't mentioned by Daryl was the Quick Link 40. It's a new route. They've been running it as a pilot, and they're going to make that pilot permanent. So it's a very positive step to improving connectivity and access to the community. And we think MTA deserves some commendation for their diligent work in establishing the service and actually establishing the service. So yes. Regarding service enhancements, the local link 73, similarly, they're extending service from where it ended at Tapsco Light Rail down to Wagner's Point, increasing connectivity in that area, and is yet again another positive step to increasing the connectivity in the community down there. The local link 85, this as was mentioned, is connecting directly to the light rail at North Avenue, and we'll go out to Milford Mill, the metro station is. They discontinued some stops at Fulton Avenue and Ricetown Road. In that small area that's down in this area, it's about a 4-block area where they have made changes. But generally, adding connection to the light rail and metro is welcome. Service enhancement to the local link 67. It runs roughly from War Memorial down to Curtis Bay Industrial Park. Again, as with the ones before, this is increasing connectivity and access to and equity to the area. So we think, again, that MTA ought to be commended for providing this service. And I sound like a broken record, but 105 all-day service. They're proposing to add AMP trips to this service. Again, it's great to see MTA providing additional services, additional run times for the community here. The Quick Link Silver. Again, there was a change in the middle part of the system. It's aimed at optimizing some operations. As I think was mentioned, there's a turn there that was problematic. Small concern was raised. We're raising regarding the accessibility of the riders that may be may have a little harder time getting access to the line. It is a block, but for those who are maybe physically challenged, a block would make a difference. City Link Lime, the proposed change here was mentioned. Shortens the loop. I think Mr. Clark mentioned there was a loading dock that was in the that they were having a conflict with. So they shortened the route a bit to divert it and to optimize operations. Similar sort of concern. This one may provide a little more access, a little more direct access to Druid Hill Park. So slight concern that may raise a little accessibility issue to the park there, but again, it's a block or so. This is service adjustment to serve the Baltimore Peninsula, number 71 through the area. We think ongoing development, they're trying to accommodate ongoing development in the area, that this makes sense. This is a similar comment about the service on the 63 and Express Links 163, serving Trade Point Atlantic to accommodate changing the route here to accommodate the development along there, and it also makes sense to us. Local Link 59, Express Links 160. As you mentioned, there were some changes to serve the community there and prevent some safety hazard. Some concerns raised in that there seems to be a stop change at the end that
Yeah, so right before the loop at the bottom where Biscayne Bay is, the stop before that is Tidewater, and the westbound stop was taken away because it's hazardous to cross that street because the cars are zooming back and forth on Eastern Boulevard. So we're just gonna sit the bus eastbound on Tidewater instead of sitting the bus in the Biscayne Bay loop, so that community can come out to the bus and get it before it's headed back westbound, because otherwise they wouldn't have a chance to get it on the westbound side of it.
So perhaps a farther walk slightly, but
yeah,
I mean,
eliminating an unsafe crossing.
pedestrian hazard.
I mean, we're still covering the whole route, it's just one stop is taken away from us.
What's the distance? Like, what's the actual?
What's the?
When you say short walk, what is it? Two
Well,
blocks, 10
it's
blocks?
not actually a short walk, because the community is like on the east side of Eastern Boulevard. There's no houses or anything on the west side. It's just like a grassy area, wooded area on the west side. But the bus stop was taken away on the west side, right? So when we come eastbound, we want to stop there, and for our layover, our recovery time, we have about 10 or 15 minutes. That gives everyone a chance that wants to go westbound to get onto that bus before it turns around and heads back westbound.
And it's like
Because the stops are very sparse in that area.
a block or two from.
It's about 1,200 feet
Existing
from
yeah.
Tidewater to the loop. And we're still gonna serve the loop, so anybody up at Biscayne Bay, because it's a big, what is it, a townhome community right there, Biscayne Bay, so they can still board the bus, they don't have any issue getting it still. We're just making sure that the folks down by Tidewater don't have to walk that 1,200 feet to get it, they can just come and board it when it's on the eastbound stop, because it'll be sitting there for an extended period of time. Yes, sir.
What was the trigger events to to do that? Was there a major accident, major incident?
There was an accident where a resident was struck by a vehicle, and that's why the bus stop was discontinued on the west side.
It's actually closer to them, it's just that
Yeah, it's closer,
it's just
right?
that they have to get the bus like 4 minutes earlier or something.
Right, so they're gonna
because
get
it
the
hasn't
bus
made
while
its
it's
way around.
right, they're gonna get the bus while it's laying over, so,
Right.
and that was the whole thing, like, just the bus is gonna be sitting there for about 10 minutes, so that gives them the opportunity to do so.
Harder to miss the bus.
Right.
So this is the challenge that I think MTA has in presenting this information, is that they did a good job with the guide, the rider guide that explained this, but it doesn't have quite the detail
Right.
that talking about it, once you talk about it, it's these sorts of nuances are more obvious. This is a service adjustment to the local link 62, 63, 65, and express link 163. I guess what is downtown Dundalk, and they are changing the service to some of these, I don't have an issue with the change per se, other than the CityLink Navy line runs straight down here, straight through, and will not stop in downtown portion or where the shops are, where the park is. And that's really the bigger difference to us, that there may be some folks that may want to board the City Link Navy.
But the Navy's still gonna serve it. That's not a problem. Navy's still gonna serve it. It's just not affected by this term, by these terms.
It goes straight through.
Yeah, the Navy
Yeah.
comes straight across
Yeah.
Dundalk.
I thought I read in the guide that it said that City Link Navy would be discontinuing stops on.
Well, there's
Dundalk
one
Avenue.
stop that's being discontinued, but we created the other stop on Dundalk Avenue that the Navy is also gonna serve. So that you can still make that connection.
So you created a stop for Navy. You just moved the stop for
Yes.
Navy, basically, is
Right.
what you're saying.
We just adjusted the stop, the consolidated, so there's one transfer point. You don't have to walk to get to the other bus.
That seems reasonable.
I have a
Yes, please.
question, I guess a process question. After the public engagement period, can you talk a little bit about how you use all those wide-ranging comments? And then maybe also, how do you report back to the public how you've used their comments?
Well, I mean, we take all the comments, we kind of categorize them by route, everything, so we can query those comments. And we just, I mean, we kind of do our due diligence. It depends on what the comment says. Like a comment may say, I need to walk too far now to get to the bus or something like that. So we'll go out the room, kind of measure it if we don't already have that data, and we'll just bring that in. And then when we make our final, decisions, we put that out and, and that's gonna be reflective of those comments that we receive. And we don't answer specifically, comments, but they are taken into account.
So Daryl, I know that while it is a major service change this fall, there's not a ton of major adjustments, but
Yeah.
last fall we had proposed some major adjustments and got pushback on
Right,
one
so
in particular. Can you talk about that and how we didn't end up moving forward? with
yeah,
it?
so last fall, we proposed the line to be truncated to like Mondawmin Station, and we were gonna extend the Route 91 down to where the line went. But the 91 didn't run as often as that line would have run. We got a lot of comments on that, like, hey, I'm not gonna be able to, I'm not gonna have the same service, it's not gonna be as reliable, things like that. So we did pull that one back, because we got a lot of comments about that. And we looked at it, we say, yeah, you're right, this 91 is gonna run about every 40 minutes. That line was, I think at the time, every 24 minutes. So yeah, it was a lot better service on the line, so we agreed with that and we pulled that back. We didn't go forward with that.
So I'm gonna ask us to sort of move through this as quickly as possible. So I will say that the next item on our agenda is the working groups, and to me, this sort of validates a little bit the need to have those groups. Don has this last slide, which the proposed rider experience group includes review of service changes, with the idea that a subgroup of people who might be specifically focused on rider experience issues and particularly interested and willing to dig into this can do so. So that's probably good. I don't want to be presumptuous here, but with regard to the current cycle, based upon the staff recommendations, I'm not seeing anything that the commission needs to do or say with respect to these service changes. People certainly correct me if I'm wrong. I think for me, it's more about introducing us to the concept. Fortunately, I mean, if we had done this and the staff had said, 3 of these service changes are really problematic for these reasons, we might just be in a different place, but we're not surprisingly. So what I propose is that we just sort of, accept them, or, acknowledge that these service changes are happening. Look at it as an introduction to these service changes and figure out how to incorporate the commission's role over the annual cycle, hopefully through a work group that is focused in part on rider experience. That's my proposal, and my suggestion for how we move ahead. Don, do you want to add anything?
I just wanted to suggest that some of these are really positive changes, and I think it deserves some recognition.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did not mean to, I think accepting the staff's assessment implicitly, let's make it explicit, reflected in the minutes, et cetera, to me is an acknowledgement of the good changes MTA has made, positive changes the agency has made in response to the various needs. So I don't want it to go unacknowledged whatsoever. And I appreciate your teeing that up for us in that way. So thank you. So is that okay? Can we move to the next topic? Anybody have any other questions or comments about this? Daryl, thank you so much. It was really very helpful, very educational, and sounds like you're doing a great job.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. The next item on the agenda are the work groups. We introduced this topic, I think, maybe it was 2 meetings ago, about a way to move the commission's agenda and work plan forward. I had proposed 3 work groups. One related to staffing, one related to project program delivery, one related to the rider experience. And there was a lot of good discussion both at the commission and then subsequent to that, including between DMC and MTA about how we could do that as practically as possible. The working assumption is that DMC would provide, as the paid staff to the commission would provide the main staff support, but that MTA would be involved along the way in all sorts of ways, and certainly as necessary to provide resources to be at the table, to give perspective, so that we're not getting out ahead of something only for MTA to say, well, if you just asked us that a month ago, we would have told you, some piece of information. So I don't foresee any issue with being sort of a team effort led by DMC as the principal staff. The other thing that people were sort of concerned about and asked some questions about was sort of this, not so much the scope, but the broadness versus level of detail of each of these groups. They were written initially quite broadly, only because they were intended to describe sort of a broad set of issues. We had not really gotten to the specific point of like, what would the specific tasks be, and particularly in view of my earlier comments about the December report and so on, and being able to do something to have a focus as we're moving along here. The BMC and MTA, with some input from me and from our vice chair, have come up with these slides, which are intended to maintain a broad purpose for each of these groups, but also to give them specific tasks to be addressed first on behalf of the commission. It doesn't mean that in fact, it's inevitable that over time that sort of task list will change, will morph, things will come in, things will be added to it. But we wanted to essentially task the work groups with, under the banner of this broad purpose, please do these things now. And then we'll sort of reevaluate, what other things we want you to do. So the work groups, you have them in your packet, you have them on the slide. The staffing work group is obviously related to workforce issues. I don't want to read these slides to you, it seems pointless, but you have them. It's broadly staffing issues, dealing with all things related to staff at all levels, but specifically to look at the salary structure, to look at how that affects recruitment and retention, to look at personnel classification and so on, to look at other employment-based incentives, employment contracts, to identify potential changes that can help recruit and retain. There is an explicit point that collective bargaining is outside the work group's purview. To the extent that informs it, it's not that you have to ignore it, it's just that we're certainly not here to engage in negotiating the collective bargaining agreements. So that's the staffing group. The project and program delivery group is focused on systems, modernizing systems and maximizing efficiency. So that one of the things that seems to be a crying need from everything we've heard is to look at how MTA procures and potential divergences from what MTA's process is with other I'll call them sister agencies, other modes within the MDOT family, as well as with agencies across the country in terms of best practices, and to look for ways that we might be able to more efficiently and cost effectively deliver projects. I just don't, I've spent a lot of time talking to folks about this, and it's not clear to me that anybody has really ever looked at the constraints that MTA is under and evaluated whether those are appropriate constraints, and maybe they are, maybe some of them are, maybe some of them aren't. versus what else is available to others in the state of Maryland. And it includes specifically questions about the State Board of Public Works approvals and just other ways to streamline. And enough said about that for the moment, but there's some very specific tasks there, and I think some areas that are ripe for some assessment and conclusions and comparisons and some daylighting. Not that it's a secret, but these things have not really been highlighted because there hasn't been a commission or anybody playing our role to say, hey, wait a second, you've asked us how to make this agency better, and here are some specific things that could be helpful. And finally, the rider experience group to look at all the rider experience issues, peer review of rider experience, key performance metrics, service changes we just talked about, identifying major challenges that MTA faces in the rider experience, looking at communications, information sharing, and cost-effective improvements. There's at least a suggestion of transit ambassadors as ideas. So, it's not intended to draw hard lines around what a work group could do, but it's intended to say, at the very least, this is what the commission would like these work groups to do, what I'd like the work groups to do in this first chapter of our work. And if the other things are identified, we'll address them as we go. So I want to thank everybody for the time you took to digest the original proposal, to give feedback, both commissioners, the agency. And this is what I would hope to move ahead with. What it requires is identifying membership for each of the 3 work groups. We'd like everybody to serve on at least one. You're not precluded from serving on more if 2 interest you and you have the time, but at least one. We will quickly poll for sort of preferences and figure out as best we can if we can get them, constituted quickly. And then it'll be up to BMC to lead the organization of those and to help us line up and identify the questions and analysis and answers, which will then have reported back to the commission over the ensuing months. So I just wanted to give you sort of the thinking about what we're gonna, how I want to do this. Certainly welcome questions or comments now, but that's the proposal. And again, I thank people for their feedback. I thank MTA and BMC for working together to figure out a practical way to do this so we can get our work done. So the floor is open.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
So, one, I agree with kind of what you stated. It gives us an opportunity to get started. I think it's a good batch of committees to kind of kick the work off. And then as we go about the business of this commission, if we discover or find there's a need for an addition, it doesn't preclude that. So I'm comfortable with the.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think there's just one I'm struggling with a little bit, and I think it is because it is so broad, project and program delivery. So for me, in order for MTA to do that effectively, and we've been obviously listening for several months, one of the key items is funding, one of the key items is staffing, and then one of the key items is all of these policies and processes that surround them. So funding, I think we have to sit over here. We've talked about our budgeting role or advocacy role. But I guess I came into this, after the last meeting with you asking us to reflect, thinking there are some, what I would characterize as like policy process, and procurement was certainly one of them. But even today, right, like the paratransit and having this one, specific policy that restricts MTA, doesn't restrict others. I think the infrastructure point that came up earlier is really relevant. If that infrastructure isn't there, then MTA can only go so far. So I think my only question about that committee is that so much of effective project delivery is an interagency, collaboration. So I guess I would just want to tease out that I think there is some shorter term work as the commission, we've got our funding advocacy up here, but there's some shorter term work that we might be able to pull some levers or hopefully influence some levers that would give a much shorter term impact. And I'm just curious, can that live inside of this project program delivery, or is that a separate group? That would be my only question. Otherwise, I agree with the overall structure.
Thanks. Well, I don't know, Dawn, do you have any thoughts about? And my initial reaction is it can live within there until we decide it can't. And that the group should think about that combination, again, BMC, MTA, and the group who convenes to talk about that. Those are all excellent points and suggestions. And, again, I'm grateful for and anxious to hear people's suggestions, particularly about things that we think could be short-term, impact.
And I can follow up with you, Commissioner Boyd, about that.
Others? Hi, Aaron, yes, please.
Yeah, I just, in a similar vein, to Commissioner Boyd's comments, that, one thing that seems to be missing, I'm not sure, but might need a home, is just the capital infrastructure planning and investment around the services. Looking at that, being involved in understanding what those needs are and kind of where would that potentially live in these three buckets. I mean, that's the one thing, I think it's pretty big, that probably should be acknowledged somewhere. And where would that?
Yeah, I'm mindful of the fact, and I remember this, the last time you were sitting in the same place and you said that you asked about budget, which is not directly, and I had said, and I still believe that the issue of budget should be sort of in a way sort of reserved for the entire commission, rather than we talked about whether we should have another group sort of working on it, but it's so fundamental, the question of resources and so on, that which I also think probably we should be clear about how we're thinking about that. But let me ask you, when you say capital infrastructure, do you mean funding and budget? Is that what you're saying when you say that, or?
That's large scale capital projects, service planning, just, if you're gonna extend the service, the capital, the infrastructure investments, and the projects that we needed to build that service. I mean, it's a capital project side of the delivery service that, we can provide the service, but there's also kind of infrastructure that needs to be planned and designed and connected. Is there a way to look at that? I mean, I think it's a big one.
Yeah, no, it's clearly
A question. I just
Yeah,
need clarity on what he's saying. So when you're thinking of projects, I'm just gonna use red and purple because they're premier, right? I think of project and program delivery. But when you say the other piece, you were talking about what's needed for service, are you referring to procurement of fleet and things of that nature? I just need clarification on what you're saying.
I think with the projects, like red line, purple line, maybe we just go more specific in the
In other
tasks.
projects like that, right?
Maybe we call that out more specifically in the tasks, they'll kind of look at that, but then also, the equipment, like the purchase of trains and the purchase of vehicles.
Which is separate.
What is, I'm curious, like, what are you looking at in that?
Just the,
Like, how is that different than program delivery?
I just want to make sure it's called out in there. I just don't see in the, what I'm reading, I just
Like, I
don't
mean,
see.
is this group trying to like question how we purchase vehicles, or like, I'm just trying to understand like
No,
what is the.
I think more of like, not how you purchase vehicles, like, when we're planning a service, what kind of infrastructure investments do we need to make sure that service can be delivered? And it's very like those big projects like the purple line and the red line.
But other projects that are smaller as well, you could be examining the project delivery method, right? And I believe that falls here in the bucket that has been defined for the working group. But then you talked about things in a more broader sense, and that was my question.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I'm thinking of things when I talk about like, capital. When you're building a budget out, you have your operating budget, you have
And
your capital budget.
programming.
Your capital budget, your programming can be a 5-year, 10-year look out and plan. So just, is there a group that's looking at that, along with MTA and MDOT, when we look at like how we plan the future of our service, the future delivery, the expansion of potential services. I know there's project and program delivery, but I just don't see it in that kind of task breakdown. It's not really called out.
I'm wondering, does that fit within the RTP and the implementation plan for the regional transit plan? Because it is kind of that like longer term planning of what we're doing and then how we're doing it. If that is like the whole group, as you guys work through and think through that. Just about.
Yeah, because when I'm thinking of capital programming, I'm thinking of a budgetary, more financial, longer term component that we would look at as the larger commission and not as a work group. And that's why I was asking for
Right.
clarification of what you
Yeah.
were saying.
Okay, that makes sense, as long as we kind of know that that's kind of part of the larger.
Well, it's certainly not, it is certainly part of the larger discussion. The question, this is purely a structural question about where to give it a home, as you said, so. Okay, so we will figure that out. These are both, thank you both for your excellent input. Any other questions? We have other stuff I want to make sure we get to in the next half hour. So if not, we will proceed along this path. You'll be hearing from Dawn about, what your interests are, and then we'll do our best to accommodate those based upon interests and skill sets and so on. So thank you very much. I think it's a real opportunity for us to start to address some issues that have heretofore gone unaddressed, and I think the commission will really make some progress. The next item is a quick one, I hope. The adoption of the bylaws. The bylaws were circulated some months ago. They're reprinted for you in the packet. The only change from the prior distribution is the elimination of some gender-specific pronouns, which is totally appropriate. I appreciate someone catching those. So if there's I'll take a motion to approve them first of all. Is there a motion to approve? Don't be shy. Motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So moved and seconded. Now, any questions or comments on the bylaws? They are amendable, right? If things change, we'll amend them, but we need bylaws for the statutes, so we shall have bylaws. Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Unopposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item I want to make sure we have time to everybody to hear about and talk about is the regional authority study. Don, are we gonna have Todd kick that off, or do you want me to say anything up front, or is Todd gonna just?
I can go through, and maybe you could fill in any blanks, would that be okay?
Sure, yeah, of course.
I'm sharing. Mr. Chair, with the recognition of the amount of time here, my name is Todd Lang. I'm Director of Transportation Planning here at the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. One of the main efforts I was up here for the 3 slides I'm going to be presenting is to give Don 5 minutes to sit down, since he's been standing for about an hour now. So as soon as I'm able to get this up on the screen. This. All right, a little bit of technical difficulty. So as the staff to the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, the BMC is proposing to conduct a study of 2 potential alternative governance models for transit in the Baltimore region. Specifically, we're planning on studying a fully independent regional transit authority. And the second potential option is to expand the authority of this existing commission to include some fiduciary responsibilities. Now, these won't be exclusive. I mean, we'll be doing a study of these 2 potential options, but the findings from this study and the looking at these 2 potential options could greatly enhance some of the potential discussions around many variations around these 2 potential individual models. So just some quick background behind all of this. Back in 2022, BMC convened a transit governance funding work group. Ultimately, that work group settled with 2 recommendations. The first, which was to create this commission, the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission. The second was to conduct a formal study of the creation of a regional transit authority. These recommendations spawned bills in the General Assembly ultimately to create this commission, but there's been several bills in the past 2 sessions looking at either studying or implementing various types of regional authorities. We thought it was time to take a thoughtful look at all of the parameters surrounding any potential new governance model. So what could the potential scope look like? As we mentioned, we said we would look specifically at the two models that were previously described. We're gonna look at about 5 to 7 peer regions and peer models to kind of understand how they're set up and how our setup could potentially work within the state of Maryland and all of our differences versus other states and other regions. Reviewing some of the previous legislation to try to understand kind of what were the ideas behind some of those potential models. We're looking at defining what would be a potential purpose and goal of a new regional governance model, outline some specific powers and responsibilities that could be included, specify some structure and governance and what that might look like, identify some potential impacts to existing labor and service contracts, identify potential funding sources, document input from the various stakeholders around the region and the state, consider any potential impacts on existing transit system, ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Ultimately, this study would end up with a final report and suggested next steps. And we propose to complete this study within the budget that is allocated to the commission and hope to complete this study early enough to inform any potential legislation that might come up in the next General Assembly. So with that, as BMC staff to this commission, we are asking for endorsement to move forward with this potential study. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this a number of times. The question of regional transit authority has been orbiting the planet for some time now, including in the last legislative session. And I think that many of us agree the time has come to study it correctly. That was the intent of the bill that did not pass General Assembly in 2023. So we want to pick this ball up, and no one has a greater interest in the answer to that question than this commission and the stakeholders we represent. So it doesn't obviously presuppose any outcome, but you know, there are lots of pros, cons, pluses, minuses, contours. The time has come to really try to run those down and help to inform and even drive the discussion. So I would appreciate the commission's assent. I don't think we need a formal vote, but I'd like to make sure the commission is comfortable with it, that you have any questions answered. But we will be the constituent, the sort of client here, and we'll get the interim report, final report, et cetera. And then we can figure out together, you know, what we think of it and how it's gonna drive the discussion, both for the Baltimore region and potentially elsewhere in the state, because the principles that are involved are the same. But our focus, not to be presumptuous, is on the Baltimore region and our core constituency here. So that's the story. Love to have any questions or comments, and I would like to have your assent when we're done, but Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, how do we look at the impact on the lots of this? That will just be part of this study, because I can imagine that it would focus more on Baltimore, and then the regions might be impacted in one way or the other as well.
Absolutely. So that was mentioned as part of the scope discussion. We really need to kind of look at the entire transit system and kind of the impacts of what this could mean to not only the MTA system and the core system, but then also the lot system.
You? Other questions? Thank you.
No question. Thank you for saying the material ahead of time. That was helpful, just the background pieces. The one piece that I wanted to make sure, whether it's officially in the scope or whether we as a commission receive, I feel like we bumped into, particularly around procurement, discussions around the port structure and the airport structure. And so for me, I think that, I mean, I absolutely understand why we would be looking at peer transit agencies, but I really would like to see an overview of the port and the way they're able to operate as an authority, and then the airport, because I think there could be some easier, shorter term movement than a longer term road of whatever this authority or fiduciary commission might be. So I just wanted to make sure, I don't know if that's a separate thing, but it feels to me like we just want to make sure we get that at the front end, because I think it would just be informative as we digest the other information.
Good point.
As a former MA 2 times, this subject also resurfaces on a regular basis, decades for aviation as well.
Yep.
Aviation does have a commission, the MAC, right? But it is not, it is probably, I'm trying to count now, it's been years, it might be 5 left or 4 state governed airport bodies across the nation. It's been some years since I checked. And so it has the MAC, the commission. It still is not a structured authority, right? That information may be helpful to others, as you've mentioned about the port and the airport, because people know they have a body that they work with. But the airport is still not an authority.
Okay.
And neither is the port.
No.
As you know, it's the port administration, it's just,
Yeah.
it's a mode, we're all modes of the department, so I
But
think.
they
this-
have some different policies around
Sure.
them than MTA, or that's what I understand. So I think just those
Yeah.
differences, but absolutely, thank you for.
Just like people say, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to speak for you, but I'm a former MDOTer. Half of my career was spent across the MDOT modal administrations. That's why you will often hear MDOTers and others say, and legislators on a state level, that there are the modal administrations and the MDTA. That one is slightly different, and that may be more of something that the group may want a briefing on the bodies as well.
Stay out of my head. I was gonna talk about the whole authority, so.
Yeah, we're gonna, everybody knows, but it's gonna become, increasingly clear how unusual the bond structure is. I mean, the MDOT entity with modes is a very, very unusual structure.
And I think just to make sure that my point is clear, because I did cross over in some language, is really, there are some other entities within the MDOT family that have greater flexibility than MTA. And I think there's a lot of comparison, particularly from the capital perspective, of capital cost and why we don't see those same kind of frameworks. I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
So I think that where those flexible points are, maybe that's the place.
Yeah,
to
no, that's
concentrate.
excellent. It's all done. And then that relates to some of the, as you can see, some of the work group discussions themselves. It's all the same set of issues.
Yeah.
And I think there are, we could, we'll probably talk about it at some point, but I think some of those have to do with just historically how MTA came into being. You know, entities came into being in different ways. There used to be a.
And we're in existence before
MDOT.
For MDOT. And they all have advocated for their different levels of flexibility over time. There was normally a thing that inspired it. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, it might be helpful if we can get you the statute for each of the one, like the commissions
Yes.
all have statutes that we can share with the group, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So it's our consensus that we're gonna proceed with this, no questions, concerns, okay, good. I'm excited about the possibilities here, and I think this, a serious inquiry in this fashion is really what is due now, and I'm looking forward to seeing the outcome. So thank you very much. Todd, thank you very much for your presentation and your work on this. We'll be seeing more of you, I suspect. Okay. The last 2 items on the agenda, there's really a third one, which is just the tours. I don't want to forget, but the last 2 items are the so-called wide transit document. In your packet is this 2-sided document, which I think is the final version of the 1.0 version of this handout. It is intended simply to be sort of a BRTC branded, why is transit important kind of thing that we can use with amongst ourselves, amongst our stakeholders, et cetera. It is clearly easy to enhance and amend over time. We just wanted something that does that. Thanks to Jake and others on the staff for putting it together. I wanted to make sure you saw it. I wanted to get any feedback on it. I don't think we're gonna wait for feedback. It's kind of at this point, because we've kind of rolled it out a few times. I think we want to be able to just, I think this is usable in its current form, but could it be improved? Sure, and it'll be improved, I'm sure, over time. But I would ask you please to take a look at it. If you have any questions or comments, to let Don know. But we will also, once we do that, we will then send it out to you and say, in one email, just this one thing, not 16 things. It says, here's this thing that we talked about. Please feel free to share it among your networks or to use it yourself to be able to be an advocate for Baltimore Regional Transit with some data, with some aspirations, with some facts, et cetera. I know MTA has also been involved in vetting this, I hope. And if you haven't, you should let Don know as soon as, I know you've been involved, but if you're not satisfied with what's exactly written here, please let Don know immediately so that we don't sort of release something. But we want it to be consistent. And there are a lot of different groups, whether it's MTA, whether it's us, whether it's nonprofit advocacy groups, who are trying to sort of figure out, like, what's the one pager? That's, what's the elevator speech? What's the one pager on why transit? Why is it important? And we just want to make our contribution to that and have our stamp on something as well. Don, do you want to add anything to that?
We hope to be using this to develop more kind of communication pieces. So this will be a baseline. We do have wordings. I think a word or two may change in here, but accidents or crashes is one that comes to mind.
May I put one question on there? What worked very well in our community, in Roma County, was to add also numbers to it, and I don't know if that's a possibility. We said, like, we have X number of employers, we have X people that are currently covered, but X people have a service only every hour or something like this. I don't know, we don't wanna maybe go too much into specifics, but on the other hand, it really helped in showing, like, hey, 30% of our population is really in need of transportation, and some of those numbers really helped with decision makers. I don't know if that's something that is difficult to incorporate or not.
No,
That makes it more concrete for people that might need to make decisions.
Again, I think it's intended to be a first effort, and we're gonna be doing more of this, and that's a great idea.
Right.
If I could just add one thing,
Yeah,
we have
sure.
it's old branding on the light rail vehicles, so if we could get you guys some new pictures on the
Yeah.
2 light rail ones you have, I would love to do
Our
that.
library may be a little dated.
Thank you, Dee. Not on the agenda, but in your packets is the actual agenda for the tours. I think everybody has signed up for a tour now. I gave you 3 dates. Just to pick one, I think that's all under control. But here's, just so you know what the agenda is, I really think this is, first of all, thank you for taking additional time to do it, and thank you MTA for doing the logistics to make it available. There's no substitute for getting out there and seeing some of this stuff, so thanks everybody for making that happen. Is there anything on the tours that anybody needs to hear or know? It's pretty straightforward.
Paper Square. Thank you to MTA for helping put this together.
When will we get confirmation for those? Because there were 3 dates, right? And I gave multiple dates, so I don't know.
Yeah, we took your first selection, so we can send that back to you if you.
Yeah, because I had some travel changes, so.
Oh, all right, okay, all right, well, then we'll communicate. And we'll do that with everybody.
Yeah, just send one list out. Okay, so the remaining formal item on the agenda is public participation. I'll give a chance for any other new business, but we always have a slot for public participation. Do we have anybody either here or online who has indicated an interest in speaking to us?
Would you like to go?
Yeah,
Please.
sure. See how this goes.
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Dan Privis. I live in Baltimore. Let's see. I think I wanted to address a couple of issues that I hope the commission can take a look at. One of the things that we see, this is a great presentation by the MTA, but we talk about equity, but I think we need to look at the broader, pay more attention to the broader issue of equity, which is created by the fact that we went from a predominantly transit-oriented society to a predominantly automobile associate society in a really relatively short period of time. We still are talking about equity in terms of the bus network, and the bus network is pretty much still the bus network that reflected what the streetcar network was. At the same time, because we had the automobile, we've had a vast amount of sprawl in terms of where jobs are located. And I think that's where a commission like this can start to bring in the bigger picture of where equity really needs to lie in terms of every person being able to get to every job in the region. And I think that will entail more than just optimizing the buses. It's going to entail having a better mix of bus, regional rail, and metro, which Baltimore falls far short on. Another thing I think the commission should look at in terms of equity is look at our peer communities, particularly on the East Coast, Washington, DC, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, and compare our transit solutions to theirs and inform ourselves more by looking outside the region, particularly in the Northeast, but also the rest of the United States and also to Europe and other places in the world. I'll just say one of the things that I noticed, there's a YouTuber, City Nerd, who did a survey of metro systems, and he did the 10 worst performing metro systems. And of course, Baltimore showed up on that list as number 8. We have, in terms of a number of passengers per mile of the system, which for a city on the East Coast is really kind of abysmal. He went to further analysis of this and saw that one of the problems with the Baltimore metro systems was that most of these stops on the metro and the light rail are surrounded by parking lots and not development. So that's another area where I think this commission is not addressing. So far, I have not heard much addressing of it. It needs to integrate more the transit and development piece. And there's no easy way. I understand there's no easy way to do that in the formal system we have now. But I think this commission can start to make more advocacy, pointing towards the need to coordinate development. Why development in DC is very closely related to Metro, and why it's completely disconnected from Metro in Baltimore is a question that I think this commission should be able to address and have some useful input with. And the final thing I'll say is that in terms of the piece that you've just developed here, is that we need to get more and more emphasis placed on the fact that the only solution to traffic congestion is giving people better alternatives to driving. And that's what this commission can continue to emphasize, that if we really want to get roads less crowded, we need to stop expanding highways and we need to start building transit alternatives. And so I guess that's all I have to say today. So thank you. Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think you'll find a lot of allies in most of that. I will say the one thing about TOD, there is, and I encourage you to be on the lookout. MDOT has really resuscitated, reinvigorated the transit-oriented development program at the state, which was very, very dormant or worse. And there are several studies, including studies around MARC and around other Baltimore area stations. And I'm aware that there is tremendous recognition of the sort of missed opportunities throughout the state, including in our area. I do expect that, and I've talked with MDOT about this, I do expect this commission will get a presentation from MDOT on the TOD initiatives, including ones that are clearly within our footprint, as well as sort of a sense of what's going on more broadly. I think people are going to be very pleased and happy with the initiative that MDOT is showing. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding, but in a fairly short time, there's a lot that's been accomplished, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that on behalf of the department.
No, I think you said it all. I don't want to add too much to the next meeting agenda, but we've been diligently meeting with elected officials and others to sort of talk about, brief them on where we're going with our TLD strategy. And, I think it's just important for this commission to also understand where we're going with that TLD strategy, which does incorporate some of our MARC lines, as well as looking at the line in Baltimore City going out to Baltimore County for the subway system as well. So, and I agree, there are a number of lots that we have around our transit system that we utilize in a much better fashion. And so that's something that Secretary's office, obviously MDOT is also very much looking at, and would love to give a presentation to this commission as well.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a few minutes, or as much time as you need, for the commission, if you have any additional items, questions, comments. I'm looking around the room.
I have a housekeeping question.
Please.
You mentioned, and it could be my personal oversight, so if it is, then just if I can get an email, but you mentioned a meeting in July. I did not have that on my calendar. So when is that date? Because it's not on that.
July 12th, yeah.
Yeah, 12th, he said. I think everybody should have, I did ask for proper Outlook requests to go out for all those, in addition to just a list for those of you who just keep your own calendars. But, I wish we weren't in some ways, I wish we weren't meeting every month, but we just have to get this stuff rolling and under control. And I think the way to do it is to meet more regularly. And I understand we'll get into vacations and stuff over the summer, but I'm sure we'll have quorums. I'm sure people will make their business. We are providing a remote option. I know one commissioner said he would not be here in July, but would join remotely. So that option is available. So I appreciate everybody's patience and indulgence in that. Whether we meet monthly forever, we'll all decide. But right now, there's just too much to do in this startup period to do anything else. So
Have invitations been sent out then, or?
For the 12th?
Yeah, in general, I mean, I didn't have anything in my
there was
calendar.
a list at the last meeting. I don't.
Yeah, that was the last time it was sent.
So it's not that invites are being sent out that just automatically go in our calendar, so.
Well, we should have two things. You should send out a list that has the dates, because people like to have a list of dates. And then there should be an Outlook request to everybody who is expected to be here for each of those dates. So if that hasn't happened, Don, please make sure that happens as soon as possible.
I do know there was an email that was sent out that had a listing of the dates.
And it's generally for, I don't write this down. It's intended to generally be first Fridays. I think the 12th ended up running into a holiday, or was close enough to the holiday, so that's why it's the 12th. Anyway, don't, just wait for it, but it'll come hopefully as early as today. Thank you for asking. Okay, anything else in the good of the order here? Yes?
Just one thing, I know we had talked about the bridge and everything that was going on with traffic. If you're really interested in learning more about what's going on with the bridge and what the rebuild process is gonna look like, we do have a community information session that's coming up next Tuesday. If you go to keybridgerebuild.com, you can get all the information to make sure that you can get up to speed on where we are with the process and what's gonna happen next in terms of even the commuting resources are gonna be talked about during that meeting as well. The last thing is, I know this commission, probably we're not at that point just yet, but at MDOT, we worked very early to start talking about legislative proposals. And I know January will be here before you know it, and it'll be session again. We're talking about next year already. But if this group is really thinking about legislative proposals that they would also like to push or promote, I think this is the time for the commission members to start sort of thinking about that. The process, like I said, is just starting for us at MDOT, but I also want this commission to start thinking about ways that you could be helpful for MTA as well.
And since you raised it, I would ask in return that as MDOT is starting to think about that, anything that implicates the work that we're doing, we'd ask you to please share it with us as best you can so that we can have some input.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. Last chance. Anybody else? Is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor, aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.